Hello, I'm Andy.
I'm Vincent.
Over the years here we've accumulated an enormous library, not only handbooks and reference material, but we've got auction catalogues, magazines, journals, you name it. Anyway, we were talking today about, which are our favourite books and which ones do we use most of the time. I've brought a few together here, which over the last probably 10 years there's been some amazing study put into print.
Yeah,
really
in fact,
scholarly work.
The whole thing span out of control because we were going through a little film on our favourite stamp book, and by the time I was like this and the books were up to here, we had to stop. So we've just, well, that's all I've staggered downstairs with.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Vince, I've got this one here.
I love this book.
It's a handbook on the £5 orange, of course, the iconic Victorian top value, which everybody strives to get in their collection. Now, this is one of the most scholarly books I've ever had the pleasure of reading. It's got everything in it you could possibly imagine. Things like the different gradients of white to blued papers for those who struggle with them.
Which is everyone.
Chemical analysis, postmarks, forgeries, the usage, you name it, it's in there. It's published by Stanley Gibbons and still available. Definitely worth a read. What have you got, Vince?
My favourite book on stamps is at the other end of the scale. It's not quite a colouring book. It's still very scholarly.
Okay.
But this is a book I have recommended more times and I've given to people more times. I bought this book as a present 6 or 7 times, and it's costing me too much, so you'll have to buy it yourself. But it's The Queen's Stamps by Nick Courtney, and what a beautiful book it is. The most fantastic illustrations.
This is about the Royal Collection.
It's about the Royal Collection, and it starts right at the beginning when the young princes, Victoria's sons, were being shown round printing house. The whole history of all the the main stamps, and how they were acquired for the Royal Collection, and it is chock full of information I've never come across anywhere else. It really is the sort of book that you can give to somebody who doesn't collect stamps, and by the time they're finished, they'll be wanting to collect stamps. It's really distills that feeling that you and I have had over what makes stamps special, those little pieces of history. So I couldn't recommend this book enough. It actually hit the Times bestseller list, I think, when it first came out. I don't know how old it is now. It's over 10 years old. And yes, recommended.
Well, this one, you'll know about it if it drops on your foot. It's extremely large, as you can see, and it's the Postal Services of the British Nigeria region, which is all the pre-Nigeria areas of the Niger coast, the oil rivers, southern and northern Nigeria and Lagos. And it's incredible work. It covers all the postmarks, the provisional surcharges and so on. It's an absolute labour of love, and I use it quite regularly when we have all the surcharges and bisects and so on. Great book. Published by the Royal Philatelic Society in London, written by Jack Ince and John Sacher. Great book. Can't recommend that one enough.
Well, I snatched one of the 2 books by Bob Odenweller, who has published this work on the stamps and postal history of early Samoa. He's also done a very similar work on the early stamps of New Zealand, and both are just worth having because they're so beautiful, but they're also packed with information. Anyone with a general world collection will have come across a few of these Samoa Express stamps. They're catalogued a fortune, and they always seem to be forged or reprinted. This is how you figure out whether you've got a real one. And it also obviously has an awful lot of history about Samoa, and the New Zealand book similarly. It gives you all sorts of great knowledge. It's that, rather like the Nick Courtney book, it's a lovely combination of history and philately, which you can read through from start to finish for pleasure, or you can find a specific piece of information that you need. Off you go, Andy. Oh no,
Well,
You know, he always brings this. He's mentioned in it. He helped research.
yes,
Oh,
it's okay. Right.
excuse me.
Robson Lowe encyclopedias, most collectors are familiar with them. They first were published in the 1940s, I believe, first of all with Europe and then Africa, Asia, Australasia, North America. And this was the final volume that he worked on before he died, where he started compiling the West Indies. This one's just the Leeward Islands. Again, great book. I had the pleasure of helping to do this. Oh, does that say to me from Robson?
Oh, so it does,
yes.
yes.
Funny enough. Oops, now the dust jacket's fallen off. Anyway, they're great books. Little out of date now, of course, but they set the template for how things should be set out, and the research goes into postal history and everything else. A little bit of island history. It's a great thing to have.
The Robbie Lowe encyclopedias was the first set of serious stamp books
They were,
I ever
yeah,
bought for
yeah.
myself, and they're just great. They touch on the pre-stamp and the early stamps, and
They do, and postal stationery and everything. And they still fetch quite decent money at auction as well, of course.
yeah, well, they're chock full of information, which would take you 3 or 4 other books, and it's all distilled in those.
Yeah.
So I really, really like that.
Yeah.
So from the fun of the Queen stamps and the beauty of the Odenweller book, to something right at the other end of the scale, which is Fundamentals of Philately.
That's a beginner's guide. Don't let that put you off.
It's a monster.
Yeah.
But everything you need to know about the creation of stamps, gum, paper, printing, philatelic terminology. This is possibly the most learned technical book in philately.
Yeah.
You really, what's not in here isn't worth knowing, and we don't refer to it every week, but now and again you suddenly realise that piece of information you're missing is almost certainly in this book. So if you're
Who's that by? The Williams
yeah.
brothers, yes, they wrote more on stamps than Barbara Cartland's ever written, I believe.
hopefully they dressed differently.
Well, possibly.
There we go. And so highly recommended to just have around in your stamp room. You should be able to pick them up second hand. They've been out now for an awful long time. Yes, another recommended book. Off you go. Oh,
Right,
that's a pretty
My
book.
last one, another very, very scholarly handbook.
One of my
the
favourite stamps.
Discovering Seahorses, the Great Britain iconic stamps from 1913 right through to 34. Everybody loves them. You get the overprints, the re-entries, proof specimens, you name it. This book goes into everything: how to tell the printings, how to spot the perforation teeth, the measurements, the plate markings, everything else.
And the incredible amount of re-entries as the plates wore out, having to re-engrave and repress them.
This page is just about the Irish overprints and so on. It's, notoriously a difficult stamp if you don't know what you're looking at and the shades and so on. And this is a great book. So,
Well,
what have you got to top that then, Vince?
I don't have anything to... Oh, actually, I do. I'll quickly show this one, though.
Yeah.
It's just a faded old thing. The world's greatest stamp collectors. I think it's been reprinted a few times, and some of the stories in here are fascinating on a human level. You've got...
What have we got?
Well, you've got George V, of course, but you've got Hein Caspary, Dale Lichtenstein, Earl of Crawford, very interesting fellow, really invented modern philately as we understand it. Maurice Burroughs. These names, if you've been around philately for a while, you'll have heard about the famous sales and purchases. There's one name in here I'm particularly fond of, which is Colonel Green. Wasn't really a colonel, and they called him Ned. The most fascinating character. He was a New Yorker. Lost his leg as a child. Used to pull up on Nassau Street, open the back door of his huge car, and the dealers would line up to sell him their wares. And his life story's worth reading. His mother was called the Witch of Wall Street, a incredibly mean person, and who was extremely wealthy, and she wouldn't even seek help for a cut leg he had from a tobogganing accident, and he lost it.
He famously bought the inverted Jenny suit,
yes,
didn't he?
that's it, and he individually pencil numbered the back
Yes,
of each
yes.
one and then sold them out so other collectors could enjoy it. A real fascinating guy. But my final one, as you've run out,
I have run out, yes.
is the Stanley Gibbons Part 1 catalogue. As with all price guides, I would recommend that you read the stuff at the front.
Yeah.
So much information there. And also never ever tear out this fantastic advert. It's in the middle of the 2022 edition. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Goodbye.